Well, grab your top hats and bonnets, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for Jane Austen July. I love Jane Austen July. I first came across it when I began booktube, watching booktube videos a few years ago, and participated in it and just had a delightful time reading Jane Austen. And I'm excited to be able to do this now, having a booktube channel of my own. If you don't know, Jane Austen July is a readathon or a read-along in the month of July where we celebrate Jane Austen and her work. It was created by Katie from Books and Things, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and Claudia from the Spinster's Library, which I'm sure all of you follow their channels. If not, links in the show notes, so check them out. And I'm so grateful for these ladies who put this together, because I'm a huge fan of Jane Austen and have been for a very long time. In fact, Jane Austen was in some ways my gateway into enjoying the classics, right up there with Dickens. And I know you know my love for Dickens, but it was really in some ways Jane Austen paved the way for me to enjoy Dickens. I first experienced Jane Austen as a movie way back in the day in the 90s when Gwyneth Paltrow and Jeremy Northam had their wonderful film Emma, that is still one of my favorites to watch to this day. And my sister made me watch it at the time, and I kind of grumbled, but by the end I was clutching my pillow and couldn't wait to see how it all turned out. And of course, that quickly led to watching the Clueless adaptation, which is a modern adaptation of Emma with Alicia Silverstone, and I fell head over heels in love with her, but that's a whole other story. But what that did is it helped me to realize that these old books were accessible and had something to say even about our world today, and could be easily adapted into a modern setting or enjoyed in its original setting. And that's why I encourage men to read Jane Austen. And I get weird looks at times. I get told that those are books for women. And I really push back against that, because I don't believe they are just for women. It's likely she was writing with her female audience in mind. But I think there are lessons and enjoyment that men can get from reading these books. And maybe you just love a good kissy story, and then these books have that. But they say so much more too about class, about relationships. They have Jane Austen writes such interesting and deep characters that are always a delight to read about. And men, we learn how to behave as gentlemen by reading them. What should be expected of us and how not to behave. Would you rather be called a Mr. Knightley or a Wickham? If you don't know what those two terms mean, then you're probably a Wickham. But I love Jane Austen. I've read all of her novels, which is sad, but I love this time of year. I'm going to be able to enjoy some more of Jane Austen. So I'm just going to go through the prompts and tell you what I'm going to be reading for these prompts. And I would love to hear from you if you're participating in Jane Austen July as well. First of all, the first prompt is to read one of Jane Austen's main 6 novels. And I'm probably going to read Emma this year. I know the group reading is Pride and Prejudice, but I just read that earlier this year. And I think Emma was the next one up I was going to read. So I'm going to start reading Emma in July. It's probably my favorite book of hers, although I do tend to enjoy adaptations of her books more than maybe the books themselves. Don't tell anyone. But that's just between you and me. Don't tell anyone. I really do enjoy that novel, so I'm going to read that this month. I try to read a different one, a new one every year for Jane Austen July. So the second prompt is to read something by Jane Austen that is not one of her main 6 novels. And this year I'm definitely going to be reading Lady Susan, because I've read that before, but I really ran through it fast and I just didn't get it. And so I need to go back and reread it. I keep hearing that it's a really wonderful, overlooked story. And I know that's our group read for the month as well. So I'm going to be reading that along with the group and trying to slow down and really savor it this time. If there's one thing I learned about from reading classics, especially having just gone through Great Expectations with all of you and taking a slower time to it, is that it really opens up a novel. So I'm going to try to do that for July, slow down and read it and just try to see if I can get a better understanding of it. The third prompt is to read a nonfiction work about Jane Austen or her time. And I thought about reading, and one that I've read in the past for this that I really enjoyed was Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. And I wanted to do a biography, but I wasn't really sure what to pick. So I decided to go with one I found called Jane and I, A Tale of Austen Addiction by Susanna Fullerton. And actually, I think the channel Fresh Parchment recommended this one, and it sounded good to me. So I'm going to put that on my list of things to read for July. And you might enjoy that as well. But I would recommend Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. It's a great little biography. At times it's charming, it's funny. You know, Lucy Worsley is such a wonderful writer. She's such an engaging writer that I've enjoyed reading through her works. So that would be one I'd recommend. And then the fourth prompt is to read a retelling of a Jane Austen book or a work of historical fiction set in Jane Austen's time. One I've read in the recent past is called The Jane Austen Project, and it's about two time travelers who go back in time to and they meet Jane Austen. In some ways, it's like they are in a Jane Austen novel themselves. And that's all I'll really say about the plot. I don't want to give anything away, but I really enjoyed that. And it had a very interesting ending, which I did not see coming. But looking around for a book to read, I came across one called Pride and Premeditation by Tirzah Price. It sounds like it's part of a series that is reimagining Jane Austen novels set in with a mystery setting. And this one sounded right up my alley because I've been reading a lot of mysteries lately. And this is what it's about. When a scandalous murder shocks London high society, 17-year-old aspiring lawyer Lizzie Bennet seizes the opportunity to prove herself, despite the interference of Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, the stern young heir to the prestigious firm Pemberley Associates. Convinced the authorities have imprisoned the wrong person, Lizzie vows to solve the murder on her own. But as the case and her feelings for Darcy become more complicated, Lizzie discovers that her dream job can make her happy, but it might also get her killed. Yes, please. That sounds great. So I'm going to read that. So I'll be reading that in July, and I'll let you know what I think of it. But that sounds really fantastic. Prompt 5 is read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen, published between 1775 and 1817. And I came across a book called Evelina, or The History of a Young Lady's Entrance into the World by Frances Burney. And from the sounds of it, she was a writer that really paved the way for other writers like Austen to come along and write in that style. But I know nothing about it. I don't know anything about her. Here's just a brief blurb of what it says. That the book is about, that it's by turns hilarious and grim, witty and lyrical. The story follows young Evelina as she leaves the seclusion of her country home and enters into late 18th century London society. If you have, I'm not 100% sure on that, and so if you have any recommendations, I'd love to hear. You can leave those suggestions down in the comments below. I'd appreciate that. And then prompt number 6 is to watch a direct screen adaptation of a Jane Austen book. These are two I'm really looking forward to. I saw the new trailer for the new adaptation of Persuasion, and that looked really fun. Kind of had a little bit of a modern vibe to it that I think I'll enjoy. Because a couple years ago, I watched that new Emma movie that came out that had the same feel to it, and I forget the actress who is in that now. Yeah, I really enjoyed that new adaptation. It was very well done. Keeping it, I think, true to the novel and the spirit of the novel, but also making it a bit of giving it a more modern feel and approach. And I loved the dance scene in the middle when their bare hands touched. It was, boy, you could have started a forest fire with the electricity crackling between the two leads. So I would recommend that if you haven't watched that one yet. But then I'm going to probably watch Persuasion. It's coming out on Netflix on July 15th. So that's just in time for Jane Austen July. And I think I'll enjoy it. So I'll let you know how that goes. Seventh prompt is to watch a modern screen adaptation or retelling of a Jane Austen book. And I might do a repeat on this one. I've been wanting to rewatch either the web series, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, or Emma Approved, which I really, really loved those two web series. They're just so well done. A very modern retelling of Jane Austen. It's like a vlog series. So if you've probably seen those. If you haven't, I would highly recommend them. And I'm not sure which one I'll do, but I might do the Lizzie Bennet Diaries again, just to follow along with the Pride and Prejudice reading that is happening as with the group. But those are my choices for Jane Austen July. And if you have a reading list you're going to do in July, I'd love to hear. You can link your videos down below or leave a comment if you're not on BookTube and you're just following along as a viewer. I'd love to know what you're reading for this month. Well, there's more Jane Austen content to come. But until then, happy reading, everyone.